to the
the flag
of the
of the United States
of
of America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
for which
stands,
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
This meeting is being recorded for district purposes. It is or may be published in part or in its entirety on the district's website without the express permission of meeting participants. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angus,
Here.
Mr. Campbell, Mrs. Curtis,
Here.
Mrs. Kehoe,
Here.
Mrs. Manganello,
Here.
Mr. Metz,
Here.
Miss Pettigo,
Here.
Miss Young,
Present.
Mrs. Fisher,
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. Any correspondence this evening?
No correspondence.
Thank you. We do not have any student teacher recognition. Moving on to presentations. Dr. Pascarella?
Okay, thank you. Yep, June, you want to pull that up?
Can you see that?
I can.
Can everyone see it?
else? Yes. Okay, great. So kind of similar to what we did with the teacher survey, the remote learning survey conducted by the board and the administration went out and we gathered community response data up through November 2nd of 2020. And this is an overarching report. Again, I'd like to thank Mrs. Heim for helping us to conduct that survey, gather the data, and help to put it in a report that I could share with all of you. Okay, next slide, June. So just to give you an idea, there was approximately 15 survey questions and we had 833 responses. Go ahead. This kind of just shows you the grade levels of the folks that you responded. Please select your child's grade level. Just take them, and it was pretty evenly distributed. Obviously, pre-K we have less students, so there was less feedback, but pretty even. Okay, next slide. This just kind of asked what building did your child attend, and you can kind of see the breakdown there. There's a pie chart that kind of gives you a visual of that as well, I believe. I'm just trying to move my screen there. There we go. But you can kind of see that. Okay, next slide. How would you prefer your child to attend school? And if you look at this, sorry. Daily, where social distance would not be able to be provided, is 51%. And then hybrid model that we're currently is 28%. 19% would continue to go remote, and 2% would continue to go through our cyber program. So that's the breakdown of where we were at. Next slide. So do you feel your child is receiving an excessive amount of homework, adding too much screen time to their day? Choose 1 if they're not receiving a lot of homework, or choose 10 if they're receiving excessive. We ended up with a 4.58. So it's leaning just slightly below 50-50 to the fact of not getting a lot of homework. Next slide.
Is that this? I'm sorry, Dr.
Go ahead back, June, please.
That's okay. This is a blend again of all the grade levels, right? So this is the average of all responses, because I would anticipate it might be different between elementary homework and high school homework.
Okay, yeah, let's go to the next slide. So how much time is your child spending on homework a night? And it kind of shows you, and I'll come back to that, Mrs. Pedigo. I just wanted to kind of go through these couple that are maybe a little bit related, and then we can talk about that. So if you look here, it's kind of even. I mean, it seems like a lot of folks are saying the highest percentage, 27%. You're looking at 15 to 30 minutes. 20% is 30 to 45. Red is an hour to an hour and a half. And, you know, it seems like only 12% or are 2 to 3 hours, and 3 hours or more is 3%. You could have a heavy schedule there, you know, some of those students having a lot of AP classes, or maybe some students that, you know, do struggle a little bit with homework, and it takes them a little bit longer to do that. So, I mean, I think overall you're looking, if you look at this, you're probably looking at folks between 15 minutes and an hour and a half. Okay, next slide. So going back to that, it might not be a bad idea if that's what you're asking for, that we could break that out. I mean, in particular, and I can get that back out as to, you know, whether or not, or how long you're spending, and if you think it's too much homework by elementary or by secondary. Is that what you were looking for? Sorry.
Yeah, yep. And some of the feedback too, initially when we started some of our virtual options, was that perhaps not all teachers were kind of checking with each other on how much homework was being handed out. So I know that it has decreased a little bit as we've moved through. And I just anticipated that maybe the team teaching approach wasn't as easy in a virtual world. But that's some feedback that I got from parents. And also my children experienced themselves. It just seemed like there was high loads of homework for multiple classes on same days that could have been spread out a little bit. So I was just curious now with the update, what that breakout would be for the older kids.
We'll see if at some point we can get that. How actively engaged is your child in their learning? 1 star if they're not engaged, 10 if they're very engaged. We're on the better half of that at 6.48 total. So I think that's pretty good, in my opinion. Obviously, we always want a higher level of engagement as possible. That's always the goal, but we're at 6.48. Next slide. So how actively engaged are you as a parent in your child's learning during the remote school day? And you can see very involved is 36, somewhat involved is 34, and not involved is 30% of the parents and how involved they are. Next slide. And this one I did have her break it out because I knew that would kind of be, obviously, students, as you might imagine. You could see not involved at the 9 to 12 level being the largest block, which students become more and more independent, as we know. A little bit more of a third, and a third there at grades 6 to 8, probably depending on where the student is, you know, in regards to their abilities to work independently. And obviously more involved and somewhat involved in our elementary pre-K to 5, right? So, I mean, I think that's probably what most of us, or at least I'll speak for myself, probably expected. Next slide. Do you know if your child's logging into their classes daily? Yes, no, or I think so. I mean, it seems like 92% of our parents that took this survey are checking to see if their kids are logging in. 7% think so, and only 1% said they don't know whether or not they're logging in. So that was a very high number. Next slide. This I thought was interesting on the 50-50 split here. Do you feel your child should lose academic points if they are called upon remotely and they are not actively involved in the class? I mean, so we want to hold people accountable. We know that was something that, you know, both our staff and our parents want, but we also want the ability to be flexible. But in all of this, you're deadlocked at 50-50, saying that, you know, some feel that they should lose points, some feel that they should not. Next slide. Have you had contact with the technology help desk? If so, how was the experience? This was the one we sent back out because some people just chose not to answer that because they had no experience with the help desk because the technology has worked for them. But out of the folks that did respond and had experience, it seems like we're about 50-50 on whether or not they had a good experience or not. You can't make assumptions in the data, but I would think that a lot of it probably came down to how quickly the response is. And I would just say to that, you know, we have to give a shout out to the help desk. It was limited, especially in the beginning, trying to do a lot. And I appreciate all of their hard work. That being said, we want to try to get back to people as soon as possible as well on our end. So next slide. So what technology issues are you having? These were the ones identified, you know, when we were talking with some of you as board members that you wanted to know. When they do have issues, where are they? You can see, it looks to me like 40% say no issues, correct? So they're not really having any technology issues, which is good. 10% are saying not sure. So between no issues and not sure, we make up, you know, half the folks that filled the question out. Other folks, you have Microsoft Teams, you have Seesaw, Schoology, and the internet. Couple things we did do, I know, is try to put another helpful hint out from the technology department to try to help problem solve some of these things. And sometimes it's no one's fault, you know, it's just that, you know, technology is technology and we have to work through that together. But in large part, it looks like there was either no issues or not sure, made up over half the group. And we did send out a follow-up, so I hope our parents were able to take a look at that. Okay, next. Are you in communication with your child's teacher? Again, you have 59, sorry, let me just move my mouse. 59% say yes, 13% say somewhat, and 23% say no. Excuse me, 5% say no. And no, my child is makes up 23%, which I think is important because some kids at certain age levels probably are just contacting the teacher themselves. Okay, next slide. Do you check Tyler regularly? This is the grading system. 12% get the daily emails that you can get. 43% log in, just log in and take a look. 28% say every few weeks, and only 3% said no, they cannot log in. So if anyone's having problems logging in, they could try to contact their, you know, building principal or technology could try to help them with that. But in large part, it seems like people are logging in at least every few weeks, if not daily, to check the grades and assignments for their students, which is great. Next question. So we asked just in general, what are some of the positives you see with our remote learning model? And, you know, just looking for buzzwords here, Lori Heim was able to get together and found that 64 mentioned how great our teachers were. So what a shout out to them for being flexible and you know, really working hard and diligently in the transition. I really appreciate it. I know our parents do too. Safety was mentioned by 60 people, obviously, that they feel that this is a safe model for their students. 34 mentioned that they like the hybrid model. 32 mentioned that it improved their child's technology skills. 24 mentioned that, you know, student independence and responsibility was there, and 15 actually mentioned they get a little more sleep. So those were the, out of them, those were the league leaders, I guess you'd say, from the positives. Next. What are some ways that we can improve? 17 of the folks mentioned going back to school. 19 mentioned in-person learning. 13 mentioned improved communication. 21 mentioned more breaks, and 21 mentioned stayed focused. So if you look at those two, those two could sort of be related. And I know in particular at the primary grades, which we're going to be talking about, trying to really work with some of our teachers in the next couple of weeks to talk about what does that look like? How can we give more breaks, or how can we help folks focus? Not necessarily only the primary grades, but that's one place we're going to take a look at. Next slide. So we had the pandemic coordinator, Mr. King, held a meeting with the reopening committee, and that was held on Thursday, November 4th, 2020. And obviously it was a very lengthy meeting with a lot of great discussion. So it would have been hard to note everything, but some committee members mentioned the possibility of rotating garnet and grade groups every other Friday. And some committee members also mentioned the amount of engagement and screen time, in particular for the primary grades. So the committee next steps, the subcommittee will be there to review, especially this little subcommittee that's going to be created of primary grade folks to look at engagement and screen time for those folks. And the full committee reopening pandemic coordinator meeting will be held somewhere in early to mid-December again to meet and review, see where we're at, see how things are going. So I'd like to thank that committee for meeting again. Next slide. At the conclusion of that reopening pandemic coordinator meeting, it was decided by majority vote, which every individual did have the right to vote that was a member of the committee. And as a reminder for the public and everyone else, we had board members, administration, nurses, teachers, custodians, staff members, parents, folks in the health industry, so on and so forth. All voices were heard. And then we kind of did a roll call vote to see where we're at. And by majority vote, the committee's recommendation anyway to the board is for the district for now to continue our current hybrid model. And if you flip back one screen again for me, June, if you're able to do that. Yeah, just remember also the committee also asked us to make sure that we reviewed the engagement and screen time for the primary grades, and also that the full committee would, meet again in early December to revisit this. But that was our recommendation at this point. I'll answer any questions that I can. Leave the PowerPoint up maybe for now, June, in case somebody asks me a question that I have to reference. Are there any questions from the board?
Dr. Passarella, before we begin there, thank you for the presentation on the survey. And we can open it up and any questions any of the board members have, please, or comments, please feel free to jump in. Does anybody have any feedback at all on any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anything that you think maybe we need to look at that maybe wasn't included here?
I have a question. Right now with the shortage in the entire state, how is the district handling the subs? Are we down subs? Do we have coverages? And what do you see that impact if we would be increasing the days? Would we be able to handle that sub if we do have a sub shortage?
So my recommendation is in agreement with the committee at this point that we definitely continue to operate in our current hybrid model, and we review the things that were mentioned in the committee. And part of that recommendation, in addition to the safety and well-being of students, staff, and community, is in fact, our sub shortage issue and our staff shortage. As we see an uptick in cases in the county and in our district, as you can see, just being transparent, it often, for the safety and well-being of everyone, is constantly, in some cases, contact tracing, and in which case you have folks that are being quarantined, which is causing a severe shortage, not just for Ambridge, but in talking with other districts throughout the county, state, probably the nation, to be honest with you, of not having enough substitutes and not having coverage. Our teachers have stepped up big time. Many of them, are using coverage periods and on their planning period to step up and teach things and doing the best they possibly can. Our administration has also stepped up and served roles to try to help and do the best we can. And I know that parents and students are being patient with us as we work through that sub shortage. But to answer your question, it's a significant issue. And even in our current model, it's coming to the point where it's going to be difficult to staff even in our current model. I think if you add more students, and which I don't recommend, and you add more days at this given point, you run the risk of quarantining even more people. And we're trying to remain even in the hybrid model, which we're very close to not being able to do as it stands now. And from where I sit, I'm not an expert, but I think that if we're able to continue to operate hybrid and staff our buildings right now, we're going to be fortunate. But to your point, adding any more right now, I'm pretty confident that that would definitely force us into more quarantines, less shortages, not have a staff, and have to go full virtual just for lack of staff.
Thank you.
I know that was, as being one of the board members serving on the committee, that was one of my big concerns. And after hearing several of the staff speak, about our hybrid schedule and the concerns they have, and my major fear, big concern there was that I understand, of course, 5 days a week is optimal for education, but hearing the concern from staff and the situation we are in right now, where we are down to the nitty gritty here, it's concerning that, I look forward to at least that we have 2 days of in-person instruction, and we're not at the point right now yet where we would be all remote. But I know, as I said, after hearing many things that we talked about during the committee meeting and hearing from several staff members at all different levels, not just, primary, we had representation on all different areas. It was very concerning to hear, that we are very close to that point of where we are slim and trim at this point. And I'd like to reiterate what a great job I have seen the staff doing, keeping things afloat, and administration and people stepping up and doing what normally is not their normal. So I just wanted to, and anybody else that served as well. I know, Denise did. We had a few other board members that did as well. If you have any other, things you want to add. One thing I did want to mention, Dr. Brasarella, was the K through 2, the subcommittee will be educational staff, right, and administration, meeting for that, and then bringing feedback back to the committee, correct?
Correct. That's the plan. I know Mr. King is working on organizing and setting, I believe he set the date for, or close to setting the date for both of those meetings in the near future.
Yeah, both dates are set, and the invites have already been set out for both committees.
Okay, thanks, Mr. King. Any other board members with any other feedback or concerns?
I think that one other piece that we should have the community understand is that our district does not have the plexiglass and some of the other PPE that they are comparing us to in social media and different things like that. So I think as you look and want to say we need to move this direction or go this direction, we have to think of that safety factor. And when doing that, I think those are the questions that you need to ask. What do the other districts have and what do we have? And then compare truly apples to apples, because that was part of the communication during that committee meeting also, was the teacher safety and keeping them in the classroom. And that's really why my concern with sub shortage is, because we need them to be able to engage and work with our students.
Thank you, Mrs. Manganello. Anybody else?
I would just also say that, there are some school districts that did do that and, did move in that direction, and some are moving back to the hybrid pretty quickly. So, I agree that you have to compare apples to apples, and I also have to be honest and say, even where we're at right now, we're just trying to keep everybody as safe as possible. And we understand, and I think everyone on the committee indicated that if safety, wasn't an issue, but it is the primary issue, everyone agrees that 5 days a week would be ideal. I mean, teachers, staff, everybody did. But at this given point, we have to put the safety and well-being of our students and staff and our community at the forefront. That's my belief. So that's all I
And
want to say.
not only that, even going into the holiday season with everybody visiting and parents and everybody moving around, I think you also got to take that into consideration going forward too, as well. I mean,
I have Miss, oh, sorry. I thought,
Go ahead, June. I'm sorry.
I have Miss Curtis. She's calling in via telephone. I have her also. She wanted to make a comment.
Sure. Go ahead.
I hope everybody can hear me. I just want to make it this comment that I have been with Safe Haven. I know you all know that from day one. And we have children 3 days a week, every week, whether they're garnet or gray, we have them 3 days a week. And as far as safety and keeping them separated, we do the best we can. So I think that needs to be revisited. Thank goodness we have not had any issues or no problems, but I think the kids need it, especially that K through third grade. I really do.
Kitty,
And I think everybody ought to think about that. And please come down, volunteer a little bit, and find out how it's going and how they actually do with their iPads and in school on a daily basis. That's all I got, Jen. Thank you.
Kitty, can you hear me? It's Kathy. June?
Kitty, can you hear her? Yeah, she's still on. Hold on.
Okay.
Hello?
Kitty,
She might be on mute.
can you just
On her
add?
end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, here she is. She's here. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Kitty, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Can you tell me on a
Go
given
ahead, Kathy.
how many kids or the most amount of kids, what day you have the majority of kids there, and around how many do you have daily?
On Friday, we have approximately 22 to 24 kids because they're not in school. We can have anywhere from 8 to 14 kids on any given day, Monday through Thursday. And we've actually had teachers that have called to request children be put in Safe Haven by whatever reason within the classroom was going on. We have them calling us to put in kids. Some of the parents do, and some of the parents do not bring them to us.
Okay. Anybody else with it? Thanks, Kitty. Anybody else with any other questions or concerns do they want to add before we move forward? No one else? Okay. Dr. Passarella, thank you. Any other comments, Dr. Passarella, before we move forward?
No, thank you. Just thanks to the committee and the board and all of our parents and students.
Oh, I did have one question about Safe Haven. Do all those kids do they stay in one room? Are they all in the same room?
No, it's 2 rooms.
Two rooms?
If we have a amount that we can fit in one room, on Fridays, we have to separate them into 2 rooms. Each child or each family, like we have a lot of brother and sister groups or 2 brothers, they get a table to themselves. So each family, say, has their own table, whether it's in 1 room or 2 rooms.
But most of the time you try to utilize 2 rooms if you can?
No, Monday through Thursday, we utilize 1 room.
One
On
room.
Friday, we we have to utilize 2, which means more
Okay.
volunteers
Okay.
to staff 2 rooms.
All right, Mrs. Curtis, thank you.
I have a question. Are the volunteers masked when they're there?
Did you hear?
Pardon me?
Are
She's,
volunteers masked when they're in there with the students?
Yes, they do. Yes, we do. We all wear our masks.
Thank you.
All, okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll move forward to public comment regarding agenda items only. In light of the state declared disaster emergency, the board has adopted modified public meeting and public comment processes consistent with the Sunshine Law. These modified rules have been published in a newspaper of general circulation on the district's website. Public comment will only be taken in written formats via email in advance of the meeting. Public comments received in advance will be circulated to the board. All public comments regarding agenda items will be read during the meeting. All other comments will be summarized during the meeting. All comments must include the resident property owner's name and address. June?
I have one comment from Sherry Paul, Ambridge, PA. I have shared Mrs. Paul's comment with the board. And to summarize her comment, Mrs. Paul has concerns with the kindergarten class size at Economy Elementary with a high student to teacher ratio. Mrs. Paul would appreciate the board's consideration for adding a 4th kindergarten teacher at Economy Elementary. And that's all I have.
Okay. Dr. Pascarella, do you have anything before I move forward?
I do not at this point.
Okay. Moving forward to committee reports. Education and Technology, Mrs. Manganello.
And I have the following for discussion, that it is recommended to approve the affiliation agreement between Wilson College and Ambridge Area District. Any questions or discussion? Thank you.
Thank you. Moving forward to Finance and Budget, Ms. Pedigo.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. President. I have 4 items this evening for discussion. Items number 1 and 2 are our standard monthly bills and salaries for both the school district and the cafeteria. Any discussion? Okay. Item number 3, it's recommended to, Resolution 2020-2021-05. AIU Joint Purchasing Program. It's recommended to approve the resolution to participate in the Allegheny Intermediate Units Joint Purchasing Program for the 2021 and 2022 school year at no cost to the district. The program includes the categories of general, art, janitorial, athletic equipment, medical supplies, audio, visual, and computer equipment, and dual purpose paper supplies. Do we have any questions or discussion? Okay, and item number 4, grant acceptance. It's recommended to accept a grant award in the amount of $56,575.95 from the Continuity of Education Grant for Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, ATSI, schools to be used for the purchase of new technology equipment at a total amount not to exceed $51,500 for equipment and ancillary devices through Dell. It is furthermore recommended to ratify the purchase of a communication service through Blackboard at a cost of $5,680.05. Any questions or discussion? Who wrote that grant, Dr. Pascarella?
So Mr. King worked on that grant. So thank him for doing that. This in particular is targeted to our high school population of special education students.
Great job, Mr. King.
Thanks, Mr. King. Thanks.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving forward to Building and Grounds, Mr. Angus.
Hi, this evening I have nothing for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Moving forward to athletics, Mr. Campolone was unavailable this evening. Just as a point of information for the rest of the board, we'll be moving forward to winter sports here shortly, which comes, basketball, et cetera. Are there any changes or concerns? Does anybody have any questions on the protocol that we have used so far? Utilizing, the sizes in the gym, et cetera. Is everyone still okay with that situation? Are there any concerns moving forward that we're not comfortable moving in that direction? And I'm speaking even of, we'll have band and choral concerts that normally are held, winter sports. I do believe the band was also asked to be a part of the parade, the chamber parade. Does anybody have any concerns, or are we comfortable where we are with what we've decided previously, moving forward and using the same protocol and following the, the guidelines as we have?
I'm fine with staying with what we've been doing.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Any concerns anywhere? Anybody, pardon? I missed that. I'm sorry. I heard somebody speak, but I didn't hear.
I think it was back.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with keeping it the way it is.
Okay. Okay, if there aren't any concerns, then we'll, Dr. Pascal, pardon, somebody else.
Did you hear Mrs. Curtis? She said she is uncomfortable with keeping it the way.
Oh, she was uncomfortable? No.
Oh, you're
Comfortable with that.
Oh, she's comfortable. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
She's comfortable.
Okay. Dr. Pasquarello, did you need to touch on any of that at all? Is there anything I'm missing mentioning?
No, I think, previously I've shared my view, but in my recommendation, but I do understand the direction of the board. So we will continue to, for indoor events, use the capacity necessary. The only addition might be the auditorium now, and we'll figure out the capacity that we could fit there. For the gyms and such, it'll work much like it did for indoor sports for the fall. So I understand that, and if I understood the board correctly, they're okay with the parade as well. So I'll just inform them if anyone doesn't feel comfortable, they wouldn't have to go, I'm assuming, correct? But if they would like to participate, they could. So I've shared my, my recommendations on that, and I know where the board stands. So I will let both the athletic director and the principal know.
Thank you. All right, moving forward to public relations, Mr. Metz.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Steering and rules, Mrs. Kehoe.
Item number 1 is the reorganization meeting, which is scheduled for December 9th at 7 p.m. via Zoom. Any questions? Item number 2 is the December board meetings, and they will be meet and discuss is scheduled for December 9th, immediately following the reorganization meeting, and the regular monthly board meeting will be scheduled for December 16th at 7 p.m. also via Zoom. Any questions? Item number 3 is policy 146.1. It is a third reading for trauma-informed approach to direct staff or district staff to develop and implement a plan for trauma-informed approaches to education throughout the district. Any questions? Item number 4, policy 203, immunizations and communicable diseases. Third reading to safeguard the school community from the spread of certain communicable diseases. Are there any questions? Item number 5, policy 209, health examination screenings. Also third reading, it is to ensure that the students' participation in health, safety, and physical education courses meets the students' individual needs, and that the learning potential of each student is not lessened by a remediable physical disability. Are there any questions on that one? Item number 6 is policy 222, tobacco and vaping products for pupils, third reading. And it is to prohibit student possession, use, purchase, and sale of tobacco and vaping products, including Juuls and other electronic cigarettes. Does anybody have any questions? Item number 7, policy 314, physical examination, third reading. It is to prevent the transmission of communicable diseases in the school setting. Any questions? Item number 8, policy 323, tobacco and vaping products. This is for the staff. Third reading to prohibit staff possession, use, purchase, and sale of tobacco and vaping products, including Juuls and other electronic cigarettes. Are there any questions? Item number 9 is policy 335, and it's an attachment. Third reading, family and medical leaves, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It is to address the emergency leave entitlements, including the amount of and qualifying reasons for such leave as established by the FFCRA through the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Intermittent Leave Provision. Are there any questions on that? Item number 10 is policy 805.2, identification badges. And it is to line up with the numbering of PSBA. Policy 8052 will now become school security personnel. Any questions on that one? Item number 11, policy 805.2, school security personnel, which is a third reading, and is to coordinate the safety and security of the district student, staff, visitor, and facilities. Are there any questions? Item number 12, policy 824, maintaining professional adult/student boundaries. It is a third reading, and it is to direct that all adults shall be informed of conduct that is prohibited and disciplinary actions that may be applied for violation of board policies, administrative regulations, rules, and procedures. Are there any questions on that one? Item number 13, policy 103, discrimination/Title IX, sexual harassment affecting students. It is a third reading. It is to provide an equal opportunity for all students to achieve their maximum potential through the programs and activities offered in the schools without discrimination on the basis of race, color, age, creed, religion, sex, sexual orientation, ancestry, national origin, marital status, pregnancy, or handicap/disability. Are there any questions? Item number 14, policy 104, discrimination/Title IX, sexual harassment affecting staff. It is a third reading. It is to provide to all persons equal access to all categories of employment in this district, regardless of race, color, age, creed, religion, sex, sexual orientation, ancestry, national origin, marital status, genetic information, pregnancy, or handicap/disability. Are there any questions on any of those? That is all I have, Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. Kehoe. Moving forward to legislative, Ms. Young.
Nothing to discuss at this time.
Thank you. Salary, schedule, and labor relations, Mrs. Curtis. I don't know if she can hear. There is nothing there to report this evening. June, is she still on? Just to let her know.
Yes, she's still on.
Okay.
Yes, I'm still on. Go ahead.
Okay, Kitty. Thank you. Mrs. Mueller, moving forward to the Sunshine Law.
The Board of School Directors held an executive session on Tuesday, November 10th to discuss personnel matters, information, strategy, and/or negotiation session relating to the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement, matters subject to attorney-client privilege, and other confidentiality laws.
Thank you. Motion on the floor to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you all for attending tonight.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Good
evening.
night, everyone.
Safe, thank you.
Thank you, June.
You're welcome. You too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ira.
Thank you.
Good night,